My experience in comedy, that most good comedy comes out of your own personal experiences. And I grew up in Chicago, and the area of town I grew up in was at the end of the bus line, and the bus drivers would turn around and they'd head back downtown. So I had been watching bus drivers since I was like 5 or 6 years old, and became convinced very early there must be a school that all bus drivers attend, because they couldn't innately know these things that they're able to do. So I'd like to take you now to that school, and as we enter the course, we find the instructor talking to the student bus drivers. Gentlemen, you have just completed what's known as a basic course in bus driving. We're going to present you here with actual situations you'll encounter while driving your buses, and it's primarily designed to find out whether you're going to be good bus drivers or possibly one of the great all-time bus drivers. Of course, when I say great all-time bus drivers, immediately comes to mind the name Larry Strickland, probably the greatest bus driver of the 40s and then into the 50s. Neil Norlag, certainly the greatest left-handed bus driver we've ever seen. So what we're going to do, we're going to take one of the students, Johnson, yeah, you want to get in the bus, and Mrs. Selkirk, yeah, you want to get back to your marks. And we're going to present you with situations you'll very often encounter on your buses. All right, Johnson, yeah, you pull your bus in. All right, discharge your passengers. Now, out of the rearview mirror, you notice this old woman running for the bus. Yeah, you want to start running, Mrs. Selkirk? Let's see how Johnson handles this. You're pulling out much too fast, Johnson. Hold it. Yeah, she gave up halfway up in the block that time. Yeah. You know, what you want to do is just kind of gradually ease out, you know, and you're kind of always holding out the hope they can catch up with the bus, you know what I mean? Now, another thing you have to watch, a lot of these older women, they'll run at 3/4 speed and they'll put on a final burst and catch up with the bus. So, all right, Johnson, let's try another one. Graham, you want to try your hand the same problem? Yeah, you want to get back to your marks, Mrs. Selkirk? Okay, same situation. You pull in, discharge your passengers. All right, you want to start running, Mrs. Selkirk? Let's see how Graham handles this. Did you see how he slammed the door right in her face that time? That's called your perfect pullout. And now, it wasn't part of the problem, Graham, but it shows you're thinking on your feet. You blocked 2 full lanes of traffic that time. Very good. Okay, Graham, yeah, Miss Selkirk will try situation 13. Okay, yeah. Graham, we'll stay with you. You're doing very well. This happens very often. You're on your route. All of a sudden, a car pulls in front of you, and on the back is a sign, caution student driver learning to drive, something like that. All right. But yeah, Graham, you want to be driving? All right, Miss Selkirk, you want to pull in front of him? Let's see how Graham handles this. Excellent. He got back, I guess about 10, 15 car lengths. Got it up to around 60. And then when he's right on top of her, bang, he comes down on his brakes. And then hit the horn with his elbow. Could you notice how the car just kind of swerved out of control? When she dove for the floorboard? Very good, Graham. All right, yeah, Miss Selkirk, you want to extricate yourself? Well, just crawl out the window. I think that's going to be a lot faster. Yeah. Okay, now this is the situation, and this will be our final situation. You're the woman getting on the bus with the packages. And I'm going to have to help you with this because this requires a lot of practice, but believe me, it's worth it. So, all right, get on the bus, that's the way. Got a bunch of packages. Now fumble for your change. Very good. All right, now start heading toward the back of the bus. Hit your accelerator. All right. Now you brake. Hit your accelerator again. Brake again. Do you see how he kept her spinning in the aisle there?
Good morning. It's Sunday. Thank God it's Sunday, June the 18th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the patriotic song of the day and the Serenity Prayer, we will have Robert-Cardinal-Sarah, The Rape of the Mind, no free lunch, and Bob Newhart. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Sing the glory of the coming of the morning.
Thank you. And now, there's no free lunch. 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
Man naturally desires not only to be loved, but to be lovely, or to be that thing which is the natural and proper object of love. He naturally dreads not only to be hated, but to be hateful, or to be that thing which is the natural and proper object of hatred. He desires not only praise, but praiseworthiness, or to be that thing which, though it should be praised by nobody, is, however, the natural and proper object of praise. He dreads not only blame, but blameworthiness, or to be that thing which, though it should be blamed by nobody, is, however, the natural and proper object of blame. Adam Smith. What is at stake in centralized control economics is nothing less than the loveliness of man. The desires of our fallen nature are tamed to some degree, not entirely, by market forces, and our longings for love, loveliness, and reputation are enhanced and served by market forces. Our moral sentiments do not merely care for our public reputation, but must be cultivated to care for what we know to be true of ourselves. A market economy most cultivates human flourishing when these sentiments are most elevated.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He knows that the government has no rights. He is religious. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American. Back in a minute. Thank you. What are the true conservative suggested federal political priorities? Number 1, recognize that the government has no rights. 2, defund Planned Parenthood. 3, replace the Affordable Care Act. 4, institute zero-based budgeting. 5, prohibit collective bargaining for all public employees. 6, assign criminal and civil liabilities to all government regulators. 7, immediately repeal the Patriot Act. 8, immediately repeal all emergency dictator laws. 9, reinstate writs of outlawry. 10, use taxpayer funds to sponsor recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. 11, create a flexible minimum wage. 12, means test health care. 13, immediately and permanently prohibit investment banking by any office holder. And 14, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Back in a minute. Thank you. What are the true conservative cultural priorities? Bring back hierarchy. Bring back the admiration of intelligence, morality, and beauty. Bring back single-income households. Integration. Parenting. The primacy of existence. Certainty of knowledge. And universal rights and wrongs. Bring back principled behavior. Masculinity and femininity. Bring back Adam 12, John F. Kennedy, the gold standard, pre-HMO medical care, and non-profit news. Bring back civil service, the term stupid question, arguments and fights, the cultural influence of the church and the Boy Scouts. Bring back the influence of social organizations such as the Lions Club and the Rotary Club. Bring back bowling. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the rape of the mind.
Part 4. In Search of Defenses. The moment we become aware that special political phenomena are a threat to our existence, corresponding inner defenses develop automatically. We feel reassured as we discover ways to face the problems. The closing chapters of this book deal first with some of the official attitudes and with the code created to encounter brainwashing, a danger which has appeared rather recently in history. The final chapter searches more elaborately for the inspiring values which characterize freedom and democracy. The question of how best to build up the military and civilian morale becomes more compelling because of the tremendous mental pressures modern civilization imposes on man. Chapter 15. Training against mental torture. The U.S. Code for Resisting Brainwashing. By executive order of President Eisenhower on August 17, 1955, a new code of chivalry was made up governing conduct of American fighting men in combat and captivity. 6 precepts of conduct for combatants were enunciated. I am an American fighting man. I serve the forces which guard my country and our way of life. I am prepared to give my life in their defense. I will never surrender of my own free will. If in command, I will never surrender my men while they still have the means to resist. If I am captured, I will continue to resist by all means available. I will make every effort to escape and aid others to escape. I will accept neither parole nor special favors from the enemy. If I become a prisoner of war, I will keep faith with my fellow prisoners. I will give no information or take part in any action which might be harmful to my comrades. If I am senior, I will take command. If not, I will obey the lawful orders of those appointed over me and will back them up in every way. When questioned, should I become a prisoner of war, I am bound to give only name, rank, service number, and date of birth. I will evade answering further questions to the utmost of my ability. I will make no oral or written statement disloyal to my country and its allies or harmful to their cause. I will never forget that I am an American fighting man, responsible for my actions and dedicated to the principles which made my country free. I will trust in my God and in the United States of America. Full report in the New York Times, August 18, 1955. In the additional report about the recommendations by Secretary of Defense, it is acknowledged that modern warfare has brought the challenge to the doorstep of every citizen, and that the final front of the Cold War line is in every citizen's mind. At the same time, a clearly defined code is given telling U.S. prisoners of war how to behave after capture. Although there was a lack of such a code previously, the report states that American troops have demonstrated through all wars that they do not surrender easily, that they have never surrendered in large bodies, and that they have in general performed admirably in their country's cause as prisoners of war. After describing physical attacks on prisoners, death marches, hunger, squalor, cold, torture, disease, and total degradation, the report gives extended attention to all forms of mental coercion intended to extract false confessions on military information from the soldiers, and to infect them with totalitarian thinking. First, the enemy is aimed at the breakdown of the leaders, at confusion of the officers who so easily influence their soldiers. Then, gradually, everybody has to undergo the ordeal by indoctrination. The enemy propaganda barrage started full speed. This suggestive attack reached minds not used to highly specialized discussion, minds not informed and rather confused about communism and its tactics. Inner discrepancies in the reasoning of the man could easily be attacked and reduce him to docile submission. The report pleads for more extended, skillful training of the soldier and the citizen. In our basic beliefs and responsibilities, a mental mobilization for the future clash of ideas and wills. There was a considerable conflict of opinion in the advisory committee to the Secretary of Defense that drafted the code between the hard Spartan view and the more lenient let them talk view. The first group maintained that every soldier has to resist to the end. The latter believed that in the end, anybody could be brought into submission. Nevertheless, all soldiers have to be trained especially to resist and not be made disloyal to their country, their service, and their comrades. That was the principal reason why this final code of high standards was made up, even though it is recognized that coercion is possible beyond the ability to resist. Yet the psychologist here adds the additional question, who will judge what is beyond the ability to resist? The report ends by underlining the fact that the total war for the minds of men is continually going on. The home front is just an extension of the fighting front. An important point made by the code is that it asks that attention be given to a far more extensive mental battlefront. By making it known that the coercive methods of the communists are well understood by us, the impact and meaning of their Cold War strategy are partly taken away. Finally, nobody on the outside world believes them, even though their totalitarian methods may be of use to them for internal propaganda in their own countries. However, we cannot fight indoctrination with mere counter-indoctrination. Letting soldiers sign a declaration that they will never yield to brainwashing has the advantage of at least informing them of what to expect. Yet this knowledge does not protect them against the subtle conditioning by an inquisitor who knows how to circumvent mental obstacles. Time and subtle suggestive penetration can break men's resistance. Psychologically, a loyalty oath, compulsion, and a signed declaration do not mean anything in themselves. Only a profound education in mental freedom and democratic awareness can help as a countertoxic. The authorities who ask for signed declarations of loyalty are not enough aware of how much propaganda and persuasive brainwashing, the other forms of mental seduction, are going on right here in our own society. They are substituting the social and national responsibility for an individual one. It is the moral and political atmosphere behind the man in the hinterland that supplies his mental stamina. The nation is responsible for the mental backbone it trains and transfers to its soldiers in a Cold War. Several POWs felt misled by their own government. They had been badly informed about the enemy, in two simple terms of black and white. By showing his good side, the captor could easily arouse suspicion about the honesty of the prisoners' leaders. From a psychiatric standpoint, it needs to be said again that everybody can be brought to a breaking point regardless of how well-informed and counter-indoctrinated he may be. When the enemy wants to persist in his demoralizing methods, he has the means. Alas, the report did not emphasize enough the difficult dialectic dilemma into which many a simple soldier is thrown. For years, he's been trained in a society or military group where obedience to the law and conformity to community habits were imprinted on him. Suddenly, he has to go select and test his own individuality and critical defenses. A Cold War asks for a high level of political awareness. This brings the problem back again to the problem of individual mental vulnerability of persons and to the general problem of morale. Mental courage cannot be cultivated by physical training only. It requires training in mental stamina, in understanding of basic beliefs, and even in non-conformistic thinking. We have to believe deeply in the cause for which we are fighting in order to resist the standpoint of the enemy. It is the strength of conviction that gives moral power.
And that was Training Against Mental Torture from the Rape of the Mind. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, part one of The Day is Now Far Spent.
Part 1. Spiritual and Religious Collapse. When the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? Luke, chapter 18, verse 8. Special note to audiobook listeners. Each chapter of this book is written in a question and answer format, with Nicholas Diop posing a series of questions for Robert-Cardinal-Sarah to expound upon. Chapter 1. The Crisis of Faith. First question posed by Nicholas Diop. Do you think that our age is going through a crisis of faith? Robert-Cardinal-Sarah. Allow me to reply to you with an analogy. I think that the attitude of the modern world resembles the cowardice of St. Peter during the Passion, as it is described for us in the Gospels. Jesus has been arrested. Peter, who followed him at a distance, enters right into the courtyard of the high priest, Mark chapter 14, verse 54, no doubt profoundly distressed. And as Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the maids of the high priest came, and seeing Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, "You also were with the Nazarene, Jesus." But he denied it, saying, "I neither know nor understand what you mean." And he went out into the gateway, and the cock crowed. And the maid saw him, and began again to say to the bystanders, "This man is one of them." But again he denied it. And after a little while again, the bystanders said to Peter, "Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean." But he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, "I do not know this man of whom you speak." Mark chapter 14, verses 66 through 71. Like Peter, the modern world has denied Christ. Contemporary man is afraid of God, afraid of becoming his disciple. He has said, "I do not want to know God." He feared what others might think. They asked him whether he knew Christ, and he replied, "I do not know this man." He was ashamed of himself, and he swore, "God, I do not know who that is." We wanted to shine in the world's sight, and 3 times we denied our God. We declared, "I am not sure about him, about the Gospels, about dogmas, about Christian morality." We were ashamed of the saints and the martyrs. We were embarrassed by God, his church, and her liturgy, and trembled in the presence of the world and its servants. Jesus looked at Peter when he had just betrayed him. What love and mercy, but also what reproaches and how much justice in that look. Peter wept bitterly. He was able to ask forgiveness. Will we agree to look back at Christ? I think that the modern world averts its eyes. It is afraid. It does not want to see its image reflected in the kindly eyes of Jesus. It shuts itself in. But if it refuses to let him look at it, it will end as Judas did, in despair. This is the meaning of the contemporary crisis of faith. We do not want to look at the one whom we have crucified, and so we rush towards suicide. This book is an appeal to the modern world to agree to look back at God and to be able finally to weep. Next question. How can faith be defined? What does it mean to believe? These are questions that ought to haunt us constantly. We should ask ourselves about the meaning of our belief so as to avoid living on the periphery of ourselves in superficiality, routine, or indifference. There are some realities that are experienced but difficult to define, such as love or the experience of interior intimacy with God. These realities grip and seize all of life, disrupt it, and transform it from within. If we want to try to stammer about faith, I would say that for a Christian, faith is man's total and absolute confidence in a God whom he has encountered personally. Some people declare that they are unbelievers, atheists, or agnostics. For them, the human mind is in complete ignorance about the intrinsic nature, origin, and destiny of things. These persons are profoundly unhappy. They resemble immense rivers with no sources whatsoever to nourish their life. They resemble trees that, having inexorably cut themselves off from their roots, are doomed to perish. Sooner or later, they dry up and die. People who have no faith are like those who have neither father nor mother to engender them and renew them in their perception of their own mystery. Now the faith is a true mother. In the Acts of the Martyrs, the Roman prefect Rusticus asks the Christian hierarchs, "Where are your parents?" The latter replies, "Our true father is Christ, and our mother, faith in him." It is a great misfortune not to believe in God and to be deprived of one's mother. Fortunately, there are many men and women who say they are believers. Many people assign a capital importance to faith in a transcendent being. Some have their gods, who are often presented in the form of more or less personified powers that rule over men. They inspire terror and fear, dread and anxiety. Hence the temptation to magic and idolatry. It is imagined that they demand bloody sacrifices in order to attract their benevolence or to appease their wrath. In the history of mankind, one man, Abraham, was able to turn things around totally by discovering faith as an essentially personal relationship with a unique God. This relationship had been initiated by his unreserved confidence in God's word. Abraham hears a word and a call. He obeys immediately. He is asked, in an imperative, radical way, to leave his country, his relatives, and his father's house, and to go, quote, to the land that I will show you, end quote. Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. Faith is therefore a yes to God. It requires a person to leave his gods, his culture, all human assurances, and riches in order to enter the land, the culture, and the inheritance of God. Faith consists of letting oneself be guided by God. He becomes our only wealth, our present, and our future. He becomes our strength, our support, our security, our unshakable rock on which we can rely. Faith is experienced by building the house of our life on the rock that is God. Matthew chapter 7:24. Thus he can say to man, quote, if you will not believe, surely you shall not be established. End quote. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 9. Abraham's faith develops, takes root, and is strengthened in an interpersonal covenant made up of indestructible bonds with his God. Faith implies and requires fidelity. The latter puts into action and expresses an unfailing commitment to devote ourselves to God alone. The fidelity is first of all that of the God who is always faithful to his promises, never forsaking those who seek him. See Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10. Quote, I will make with them an everlasting covenant, that I will not turn away from doing good to them, and I will put the fear of me in their hearts, that they may not turn from me. Close quote. Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 40, referring to Isaiah chapter 61, verse 8, and Isaiah chapter 55, verse 3. Faith is contagious. If it is not, that is because it has become insipid. Faith is like the sun. It shines, lights up, radiates, and warms everything that gravitates around it. By the strength of his faith, Abraham draws his whole family and his descendants into a personal relationship with God. Certainly, faith is an intimately personal act, but it must also be professed and lived out in the family, in the church, in ecclesial communion. My faith is the faith of the church. So it is that God will call himself the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. Exodus chapter 3, verse 6. The God of the fathers of the people Israel. Faith is truly a strong relationship between God and his people Israel. At first, God takes the initiative in everything.
Lord Rush Limbaugh's on by the Rush Hawkins Singers is exactly what's called for.
Every day of the EIB.
Rush Limbaugh's On.
Thank you. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. And until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.